Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. If you're a chief executive, or if you think like one, and you want to create exponentially greater impact, then this show is for you. My name is Richard Medcalf, founder of X Quadrant. I coach some of the most successful and impressive CEOs and executive teams on the planet and help them achieve extraordinary results. And no matter how successful you've been in the past, there's always a whole new level of impact available to you. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO.
You know the deal. You go to a leadership retreat, you come up with a bunch of really great ideas about how you might level up your team or your organization, and then a couple of months down the track, nothing has happened. This is something we see happening all the time. And in Richard's world, we're talking about strategy sessions. In mine, we're talking about learning and impact of learning. So today we're going to talk about the problems with the one and done approach. So welcome to season 3, episode 8 of the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. I'm Davina Stanley, and I'm here today with Richard Medcalf, as always, to talk about some things that are going to help you level up in your business. Hi, Richard. How are you?
Hi, Dav. Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. It's a cold winter's morning here, but I'm sure for you it's some balmy summer's day in Sydney, so I'm very envious.
Well, you might feel a little better to know that I'm going to Melbourne tomorrow and it won't be as warm down there. In fact,
Melbourne's
the
terrible,
outskirts of Melbourne will be really chilly, really chilly. My dad had snow on his deck a couple of months ago. All right. So it
Wow.
does get cold here too
Okay,
sometimes.
occasionally. That's
Yeah.
pretty good.
But you're right, not in Sydney today. It's actually quite nice. I
Yeah, I
won't
can see
tell
the
you the
sunlight
temperature.
streaming through your blinds, and yeah, here it's still dark, and there'll be a glimmer of daylight at some point in the day. So anyway, that's the choices we've made.
It
Yeah.
is.
So hey, yeah, I love this topic. Nothing happens after our offsites, because it's so frustrating. I've been there, when I was in various corporate roles. You'd have these meetings and they'd be incredible, right? I mean, they'd be like, everyone would be excited, they'd be pumped
Yep.
up. You'd have a whiteboard full of ideas. You might have had an external trainer who's done a little bit, and you're like, oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
And
you know
then
what? You even give them a round of applause at the end. And we external facilitators know how to make sure that happens, let me tell you.
So you get all this stuff, and you feel, oh, this is a key moment in the life of our team. And then you get back, and then you get back the next year, and you realize like you didn't do anything with it really. Possibly you have a couple of weeks, a couple of months where there's like a bit of follow up in your regular meetings, where there's a few items on the agenda, but they kind of gradually fall off, fade off, didn't do, and it just all dies a quiet death. At least
Yes,
what I've
yeah,
found.
all too common. All too common, isn't it? So easy to let it happen and just let the day-to-day of business get in your way, doesn't it? And not stay focused. So what can we do to implement all the good stuff? What can we do to make sure this actually happens?
Well, I guess the first thing almost is just to have a think about the why, right? So why is this kind of stuff happening? I mean, the first thing is that most offsites add things and they don't subtract things. Right? They're always like, these are all the new things we can do. And yet everyone's complaining in and around the session about how much they've got to do, how overwhelmed they are, how overwhelmed their teams are. But nobody likes to do that, right? How many sessions are there which is like, hey guys, let's identify our top 3 initiatives to cut, right? Nobody does any of that. It's always like, what should we do? What else shall we do? And so we don't really finish things, we just kind of add things. And so most of these things are structurally designed just to overwhelm ourselves even more, to be honest, in my perspective. And I guess the other thing is as well, often these teams are basically a group of execs getting together. And execs aren't always the best people to write down and follow up on actions, especially actions which are not directly their own organization's responsibility necessarily. And
Isn't it much
so,
more fun to focus on the ideas?
right.
Focus on get excited about things that are new. Is that part of what goes on?
Yeah, well, yeah, probably is for me, to be honest. I mean, I love talking about new ideas, right? But then if I have to but then spend an hour writing up what the notes into a structured action plan that myself and other people and other execs can deliver on. Yeah, it's a bit less fun, right? And perhaps I've got other things that are going to help me achieve my KPIs more directly. So I think often we don't even have the right people in the room to really maximize that follow-up. And I think it's probably one which you're also sensitive to, which is the point that a lot of these events kind of rely on expectation, inspiration, and excitement, right? It's it's that buzz of, oh, here's these exciting things and here's a vision. And so there's an event, but there's not a process. There's not a process to actually deliver on these ideas.
There's a fear that it becomes a bit of a grind, doesn't it? And I think, when you're doing anything to improve or to go through a process, it's not exciting. So there's got to be some ways to get the dopamine back in the game, doesn't there? To make it fun and make it feel interesting and feel like there's some sense of achievement and progress, doesn't there?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's really, really hard to sort of stay on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose with that in mind, with that context, we can kind of think about some things to actually do. And I suppose I would also refer people to, in our first season of the podcast, there's an episode on, in the 5 impact multipliers, there's an episode on mastering transformation, which is about building new habits. In a sense, we are talking here about how do we take those ideas that we've created and turn them into habits. So there's some overlap with that, I think, but I think it's helpful just to think about it in the context of an offsite. So I got kind of, I guess, five fairly quick ideas just to kind of keep in mind. The first one is understand when you're making decisions and come up with ideas, like what is almost like a once and done decision. Like let's like sign off on a new initiative, or let's allocate budget to something, or let's invest in a new IT system, or whatever it is, right? Those things are kind of almost pretty simple. You have to make the decision, which might be a hard decision, but once you've made it, it's pretty much a tick the box exercise. It's done. That's actually quite simple. The hard stuff is the behavioral change. So you need to know how many behavioral changes are we asking of us all as a result of this offsite, and don't ask for too many, because people, it's just so hard to focus on more than one or two.
Yeah. And I see you've got another note here about delegation too. Yeah.
So I suppose, again, once you've made those decisions, then delegate the stuff which you don't need as a team to be really driving. In other words, you've made a decision, had an idea. That's almost the value that you need to create. And at this point, you need to kind of make sure that that's well handed off with some kind of loop back to people. So,
yeah, no, that makes sense. And you've got some other simple things there too.
So number two, I guess, I mean, in a sense, it's just sleep on it. Often, everyone gets excited and writes down a really ambitious set of actions and initiatives from these projects because everyone's pumped up, right? But that's kind of like, I don't know, deciding to marry somebody, after you've just met them in the bar or whatever, right? I mean, you're kind of wedding yourself to this long-term relationship with this project, right, that you've just come up with, an hour ago, right, in the heat of the moment and in the buzz in the nice hotel room or in the wonderful Zoom room that you're in. And so kind of count
this
the
cost. This
cost.
is the Las Vegas what have I done moment. Is
There
that
we
what
go,
you're suggesting?
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. Yeah, exactly. This is a kind of a shotgun marriage, in some Dodson dodgy bar. Kind of sleep on it and say, like, if we could do one thing, like, what would that one thing really be? And the problem is, we love to go big or go home. We go, let's do it all, let's transform everything. But I think transformation comes from small things that stack on each other.
Yes, compounding.
Compounding, yeah, absolutely. So one person I used to follow, I remember who now, he said, big is small and small is big.
Not James Clear by any chance?
It
Atomic
wasn't, but
Habits?
it's all that kind of idea.
Mm,
Yes.
mm,
So,
mm.
in fact, I think it was Kent Julian told me that, who's a speaker. But yes, big is small and small is big. In other words, it's the small things when they stack that actually have the big changes, and the big
Yeah.
flamboyant actions don't actually create the impact that we think. Simple example, I mean, actually keeping the marriage theme, it's like your wedding day is a massive thing, but actually in terms of the overall success of your marriage and your life, it's not a big thing, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Whereas like biting your tongue when you really want to criticize some minor, you know, annoyance in your partner every time over breakfast or whatever. That's a
Is a
small thing,
really
but actually a
wise
big thing.
thing.
Yeah,
It's a very big thing. 28 years in, I concur.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
not that I'm sure
yeah.
you have any bad behavioural tics, so that's fine, right? At
Oh,
least you
well,
don't get
you are
any.
more than kind. Let me just say, I assure you I do.
So yes, the first one is to really kind of count the cost before you jump in
Mm,
and decide, like, is this, like, let's do a few things that we really nail rather than,
mm.
it's actually easier to kind of grieve over the projects that don't happen before you even start them than
Yeah,
just to kind of get in and get cynical because they never
yeah.
happened. Um,
Yes, yes.
and then perhaps point number three is around, and I've talked about this again in previous episodes, but I think it's so important, which is changing your
Mm,
environment.
mm.
So how is it that you're going to shape your environment to reinforce these decisions? Now, your environment doesn't have to be your office. It could literally be the presentation, the agenda template for your next meetings that
Yes.
are coming up, right? Or your one-on-ones that you're going to be having. What are you going to cover? Or um, you know, or perhaps you even declare to other people around you what you're doing, right? It's like the dieter who announces they're going on a diet. Suddenly they're on the hook,
It's
right?
accountability. Yes. As soon
Accountability.
as you go public with something, yes, it's invoke shame, don't you? If you don't do it, and embarrassment, you set yourself up
Yeah,
to
yeah,
avoid
exactly.
that. Mm, mm.
Yeah, I like the example of it's like in the any film, right? There's a moment where the hero has to get off the couch and go and do something, right? It's the Hobbit has to leave Hobbiton, right? Um, because basically they weren't going to do it otherwise. They were just living their life, and something happens. It's an
Yes.
inciting event that gets you into the action. And I think
Yes.
sometimes you need one of those, right? If things are a bit
Yep.
too subtle, um, then they can be easy to forget about them.
Yep. So do things to make yourself get off the couch.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Beautiful.
another key environment is a way of shifting environment, and it's broader. And again, I've talked about some of these ideas before, but language. So um, especially as the leader, and especially if you've say had some external intervention where you've been introduced to some new concepts, it's
Hmm.
like you keep them alive by speaking about them and by using the language that was introduced.
Mm, mm, mm,
Um, I use a tool in the business called the GC Index. It measures your propensity to have impact in different areas of the business. I find it's really interesting. It's a bit different from a personality tool. It's not measuring personality. It's really measuring, do you want to innovate in this business, or do you want to just deliver the goods, or do you want to be the planner and the strategist? It's kind of really trying to get into those kind of roles, and
mm,
where your
mm.
energy is. And it's a very simple language. And I always say to people, like, because everyone again gets the buzz, they're all getting these insights as who they are and who they are as a team. And I say, look, this is like you've now learned like a foreign language. You understand it, but you'll feel uncomfortable speaking it because it's a bit unfamiliar.
Mm,
You need to get
mm,
familiar with speaking it to each other and weaving it into conversations. The first times it'll feel awkward and forced, but that's just because you're learning a new language. But once you start to use it, then suddenly that's a new change in your environment and it will stick and it will have much more
mm,
impact. So if you've been learning a new tool about account management or stakeholder management or leadership or team building or whatever it is, um, again, as a leader, like literally force yourself for the next few meetings to
to
kind of weave
actually
it in.
use the
Yeah, count
words, use
count how
the
many times you use the
words.
words.
Yes, yes. And is it sensible for some of these things, for consistency's sake, to put a reminder in your diary once a month saying, am I using this language still? Or am I
Mm.
talking about this project still? Is it helpful to put
Mm.
some of those automated prompts in place, because you sort of do it in the first few times, but how easy to get derailed and just stop doing it and talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually my fourth point, believe it or not, but it's around, I mean, so it ties in really nicely. So, congratulations. I'll give you some, give you an extra bonus point there.
For intuiting you.
Yeah, but it's about awareness. So what you just talked about there, this is about how do I maintain awareness, right? So again, if you've got, first of all, identify, what are the real behavior changes that you need here and get rid of the once and done ones. Second one is, sleep on it and count the cost. The third one is change your environment. And this fourth one is build awareness. And to build awareness, so I give an example. When I coach my executive clients, one thing I do often will identify particular habits and disciplines, and we will set up using an app an automated check-in once a week, once a day, depends, just to bring awareness, just to get to reflect on, did I do this today? Did I do my best to use, to do this habit, to use these, whatever it is? And
yeah.
just the awareness of it, just knowing that you're going to get that email at 8 in the morning or 8 at night or whenever it's going to be, it just kind of keeps that in your back of your mind somewhere.
Yes. And do you actually make them do anything? So they receive an email that says, have you done this thing today? And do you make them click something or do something? Is there some sort of micro action that you ask them to do to sort of, tiny thing?
Yeah, so I have a little app called the X Quadrant Hub, which really brings together all the coaching experience. So all the session notes, any actions they've agreed, any reflections and journaling they've done. They've got their kind of own personal development plan in there. But it also tracks KPIs. So what people will get, so what happens is you get your email. Let's say it was like, sometimes I just do a simple, did I do my best to ... So, did I do my best to empower my team, or did I do my best to like speak up with confidence in key meetings, or whatever it is. Or in this case, it could be, did I use the vocabulary from this program, or whatever, today. And the action is very simply, they'll hit reply and type in normally a number. So it might be, how many minutes of strategic thinking did I do today? Or on a score of 1 to 10, how well do I feel I did? How much attention did I give this today? Right. And so often it's even just as simple of how aware was I of this today? How much, how much did I try to weave this into my daily activities? And just even giving yourself this score from 1 to 10, which is totally arbitrary, right? It's just your own feeling about your engagement, but it tracks it and they get a nice chart. And so they can really see, oh, look, I've had a dip. What's going on there? And think
Love
about
that.
it. And
I
that's
think that's
powerful.
a really powerful, from a learning or personal behavior change perspective. I think that's really, really powerful. No, well done you. I didn't know you had that. That's a really great thing to have.
Yeah, well, it's because it's all, I mean, it's all about transformation, right? Like everything is, you've got to bring, you've got to have this immersive environment to really see change.
Couldn't agree more. Love that.
So that's the fourth one, really, bringing awareness, right? So what that might look like is, especially around, as you start a meeting, again, this is about to change your environment, have a slide that reminds you to just check in about whatever it is. Hey guys, you remember we talked about this? Let's do this as we go into our meeting today, right? Let's agree to let's make sure that every topic we have is really a topic for this team, and let's just challenge each other if we feel that we're doing something which is too in the weeds and we should be delegating this decision. Let's just have that reminder at the start. Or at the end of it, you could literally have a question on the last slide, just like, how much progress did we make on our top 3 strategic projects from the offsite A, B, and C, and just have it. And people can just look at the end and go, yeah, how did we do on that? Yeah, I think we did pretty well. Oh, this one we're not really. This one's number 3 is not really moving forward. So it's just a way of reminding that despite all the operational stuff, it's a reminder that, oh yeah, these strategic projects are not
are
moving
really
forward.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I circle back and ask you a question? Because one of the things you mentioned early on that really struck a chord with me was this idea that we can be overwhelmed with all these exciting new things, and we very rarely prune the list of things. We add things to our plate rather than taking them off.
Yes.
What sort of ideas do you have, or what techniques, what rules of thumb do you have for saying, okay, is it a bit like, to use a really feminine example, when I buy a new dress, I have to throw one out? Is that what I'm saying, I'm going to do? Is it that I take one on, I've got to throw one out? Do you have a one for one? Do you have any ways of thinking about that?
Well, that's a good point, because I definitely always throw away a dress whenever I buy one. So
I thought you
I'm
would.
very religious about that.
I was reaching for something more meaningful as an example, but I thought that made a sense.
That's okay. I think I can grasp the concept.
When a real estate agent did say to me the other day that apartments were like dresses, you just buy them when you see them. You should always have plenty. I thought that was a little bit odd.
That reminds me of when I went to buy my wife, and when we went to buy when we were looking for engagement rings, we
Yes.
went to a very expensive place, more just to look. To be honest, we were just starting to look
Get
around.
ideas, right?
Yeah, and we
Yes.
went to Place Vendôme in central Paris, with all these super expensive jewelers. And my wife tried on this ring. It was the time when the francs were coming in, well, the euros were coming in and francs were leaving, right? And obviously there was a ratio of about 7 between the two.
Oh.
And they gave us a price, and I thought it was a price in francs, and it was a price in euros, right? So, but my wife put this ring on, and she said, "Oh no, this is too big. It's this really huge thing. This is," and the sales guy said, "Madame, you mustn't be scared of volume." I thought it was a pretty self-serving sales clip, but we never forgot that. 20 years later, we really talk about that one.
That's a good one. Yes.
So I think I've forgotten where we were here. Oh yeah,
So
about
volume.
about
How do we
volume.
prune the volume?
Yeah, so pruning volume. So I suppose I don't have a fixed rule, because every team is kind of different,
Yeah,
based on their
sure.
ability to delegate and their ability, how much they have to be managing that. I do tend to say, there's a couple of concepts, I suppose. The first one is to occasionally do a commitment inventory, which is really writing down what are you actually committed to doing, and how much time does that need, and do you have the resources, do you have the time to do that? That's a great exercise to do, although it's quite analytical, so you need to set aside some time. I think it is a good habit to actually say, what are we going to stop doing, as much as what we're going to start doing.
Yeah.
And on a personal level, it's like, if we're going to do this, how are we personally going to clear time in our diaries for this? How are we going to clear up, how are we going to find extra time? And often people will say, oh, everything I do is important. I really can't find it. I can't find extra time. I'm going to have to work more. And it's like, well, look, working more is probably not an option, just given everything else in our lives, right? So here's the challenge. Come back and tell us next time, what are the bottom 10 to 20%? Right, very specifically, what are the meetings, what are the projects which you're going to stop doing? And often people say, well, I don't think I can do that. It's going to be very hard. In which case, it's like, well, if you can't do it by this time next week or next month, then you bring your diary and we'll put it up on the screen, and your colleagues will help you to identify
the things you shouldn't be doing.
the things you shouldn't be doing.
And
And
how
suddenly
and
nobody comes to let their colleagues decide what shouldn't be on their diary.
Really? How do you define bottom, though? How do you define bottom?
How do you find the bottom? Well, I suppose I think about things in terms of, are they $10 an hour tasks, $100 an hour tasks, $1,000 an hour
Nice.
tasks, $10,000 an hour
Yes.
tasks,
Impact.
and just kind of think literally, if I wasn't doing this, if I couldn't do this, who would I have to get to do it? Yeah, what would it cost for somebody to do this?
Yes.
And that's often
Good
a great
plan.
one. And then
That's
I
an
think,
excellent one.
and I think the other one is just looking at meetings often, right, and just going, if I wasn't in that meeting, what would the impact really be? And often we're there because of FOMO, we're there of habits, because we want to kind of be seen as participative, supporting our colleagues, but actually asking those key questions about what's the value that you really need me to bring in this meeting? And often it's just, we just need you to be in the loop. Oh, great. Well, you can send me an email, right? Just keep me in the loop.
Exactly. Yes, yes. FYI, and I'll put that to the, read
Yeah.
when I get time box.
Well, let's finish off just so that we don't take too much time, and
Yes,
let's talk about number
exactly.
5. Let's do number
Last
5,
one.
shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Number 5 is treat this, whatever it is, so treat coming out of the offsite as a project. So again, it's like, how do you know when you're done? What meetings do you need to progress these initiatives? How do you review and course correct? When do you want this whole thing to be finished by? Or have you just established a kind of a permanent thing? In which case, permanent things are fine, but you can say, well, the project of establishing this as a permanent discipline is going to last 3 months. So by the end of 3 months, we need to figure that this is totally self-sustaining. So at least you've got this kind of time-bound area of focus. And you probably need to have a project manager who's not going to forget to do the actions, follow up, take the minutes, generally make sure it stays on track. Again, having it as like an extra thing floating around that no one's quite taken accountability for, amongst a group of execs who've got other things they've got to be focusing on, is a recipe for generally not much happening.
Oh, just distraction and fluff, isn't it? Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then people, you get this thing where people are like scrambling to do some kind of action just before the next meeting just to show that they've done something, but it's normally like, oh, I sent an email to Bob. It's not that I actually really drove this forward, it's just that I've done enough to be able to say that something's happened, and nobody seems to really push back on that. And then so these projects then just take this snail's pace and it just becomes painful.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I think there are, 5 really, really useful ideas there. One about separating once and done from behavioral sort of challenges and changes. Sleep on it. Don't regret the next day in Las Vegas. Make sure there are things to make sure you get off the couch. So things that change your environment. Make sure you do things to remind yourself, bring some awareness, keep awareness on the tasks that you've agreed to, and treat it as a project, which means it's got a deadline and it's got some really clear boundaries around it so that you get a sense of achievement. I think they're 5 really useful things for people. So look, I think that's it for today, isn't it? So next time, and you've alluded to it today as well, is all about how do we spend less time on operational topics and get more into the strategic, the substance of the things that we need to be doing. So before we wrap, Richard, are there any final thoughts that you've got there?
Yeah, events inspire, but it's processes that transform.
Oh, nice.
So we need to have a process and work on the process that's surrounding the offsite, actually much more than the retreat itself. It's back to the wedding example, right? You need to think about, first of all, how we're preparing, but more importantly, when we actually have to live those changes, what are we going to do? And so again, as another resource, I would definitely check out the episode on habit mastery, on mastering transformation in season 1, where we again dive into how do you build those new processes into the life of your team.
Brilliant. Oh, look, that's fantastic. So as ever, everyone, you can get the show notes from this podcast at xquadrant.com/season 3, episode 8. And if you'd like to look at any of those historic podcasts, like the one Richard just mentioned, pop down to xquadrant.com/podcast, and they'll all be there for you. So thanks so much for your time today. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye for now.
Speak to you soon. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now let's talk about you. When you're in top leadership, when you're in the biggest role of your career, who supports you at a deep level as you lead others? Who helps you multiply your impact and get to the next level? If you're ready to learn more about our content, our coaching, and our community, then visit us at xquadrant.com.